Good evening and welcome to what is the final talk of 2024. So tonight we're talking about, or rather Gary and Steve are talking about, the mental health benefits of role-playing games and games more generally. Gary and Steve are involved with a charity called Game Therapy UK, which is what they're here to talk about tonight. And this talk forms part of our Get in the Game project, which is about using gaming to reach veterans of recent conflicts. This webinar is being streamed on YouTube, assuming the technology works. As usual, we have an hour, 40 minutes for talking and 20 minutes for questions. If there's lots of questions, we might run over. It wouldn't be the first time. But please, 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 if you've got a question, put it in the Q&A, not the chat, because I think Gary has a use for the chat, which he will tell you about in the moment. And not to always remember to give a shout out to our funders, the Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust. So without further ado, let's do some quick introductions. Gary, a little bit about yourself, please.
Hi, so I'm Gary Coleman. I'm the chairman of Game Therapy UK, which is the charity that we're going to be talking about. I'm military myself. I have a military background myself. I'm a civilian now, but I did 14 years in the army as an army doctor. But that was about 20 years ago. I was very much younger than I am now. I still work 1 day a week as a doctor. I work with people experiencing homelessness in London, 1 day a week. Otherwise, I do lots of other things. And one of the things I do is the charity work.
Cool. Thank you. Steve?
Thanks, Steve. So my name is Steve Cox. I am the chairman for Tactical Advance to Game, which is like a subsidiary of Games Therapy UK. We look after veterans and current serving personnel, and we deliver therapeutic gaming via tabletop role-playing games. So we organise through our Discord channel a variety of different games for people to join. We do it all for free.
Cool. Thank you very much. Just to say that we will put lots of links in the chat for everybody to click on and find out more as we go through this talk. So Gary, what's the purpose you want people to do with the chat? What would you like everybody to do?
Well, I think it's just not. Thanks very much for having us on. I think it's just always nice to sort of let people know what the charity is doing. The charity does a lot of work. The idea of the charity is basically we want to spread the therapeutic benefit of gaming as widely as possible. And this is evidence-based gaming. So we work with a lot of clinical psychologists, occupational therapists, academics to develop what is the best way to maximize the therapeutic benefit of gaming. And also what's the best way of minimizing any potential harm that there might be in gaming with vulnerable groups. So we just want people to know about that. So thanks.
Okay, but so in the chat, if people could put what their gaming interests are, perhaps that might help us a little bit.
Yeah, I was just wondering. Yeah, so just in terms of the audience, just so we can sort of tailor the talk a little bit. I mean, are people gamers? Do they? What kind of games do they play? What are they interested in? We can maybe sort of focus on that. Are there any people with clinical backgrounds who are interested in? So the areas we work with at the moment, we're working with people experiencing homelessness. We work with military veterans. We're working with young people with special educational needs, neurodivergence. Next year, we're working with prison populations and also working with cognitive impairment and dementia. So if anyone's got any kind of clinical areas, we can talk about that. If they're into gaming, we can talk more about that. If it's a military interest, we can, both me and Steve have got military backgrounds, we can talk about that. Yeah.
So whatever you're interested in gaming, in a couple of words, please, not too long. Please put it in the chat, and then because we can all see that, and we will try and respond accordingly. So, first of all, Gary, can we have a bit more detail about how game therapy came into being? You said you're in the army, you're a medical background. Where did game therapy come from?
So, well, long before the army, when I was a kid, I used to play. I saw in the chat somebody mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. So when I was a kid, I was just passionate about Dungeons and Dragons. It was pretty much my social life when I was a kid. I think this was before people sort of talked about, people being on the spectrum or being a bit autistic. We were just geeks. So I was a massively geeky kid. And yeah, my social life was Dungeons and Dragons. So, I wouldn't have thought it was therapeutic, but, looking back on it now to my childhood, it was clearly very helpful to me. And then I went off to, medical school, and I joined the army. I did a bunch of time in the army. And much later, after I left the army, I was working with people experiencing homelessness. And I'd still played Dungeons and Dragons. I still played similar games. And I was always aware that actually in America, they were doing a lot of work in this area called therapeutic gaming, or they were calling it geek therapy or Dungeons and Dragons therapy. And I remember looking and thinking, well, that's interesting. They did an awful lot of stuff with trauma, psychological trauma in America. That was their interest. And so the people I was working with were people experiencing homelessness, and they'd had a life of psychological trauma. And I was just curious as to if we played games like Dungeons and Dragons, would it be helpful for them? So that's kind of that was my first interest in exploring geek therapy or Dungeons and Dragons therapy. And of course, at the same time, or at a similar time, because my military background, the other bit of trauma, as you think about, is the experience of military personnel and veterans with trauma. There, a lot of them will have suffered or experienced trauma and then suffered from PTSD, but even more will have suffered what clinicians call little t trauma, which is just trauma. You haven't got to have PTSD to have suffered traumatic events or seen traumatic events. And it's very, very common in the military. So again, we were just curious about the impact of trauma and could gaming help? So initially, this is before the charity existed, myself and one of the trustees, Finbar Westall, who also work with homeless people, we set up this little project to look to see how it works with homelessness. And out of that, the charity developed as an umbrella organization, I think, to support all these different projects working with therapeutic gaming. And again, it was mainly games like Dungeons and Dragons. So we were really interested in the charity now really is game agnostic. We'll look at any game, but I think we're still really interested in the benefits of cooperative games. So games which are complex and you play together. I think they're the ones we're most interested in. So some computer games like that and some board games like that, but tabletop role-playing games, things like Dungeons and Dragons and Cthulhu and those kinds of things, Warhammer to an extent, I think they're ones we're really interested in. I think they may have the most therapeutic benefit. So that's kind of how I got into it.
Steve, how did you get into it?
Well, my gaming experience didn't start as early as Gary's. So I, again, like Gary was military. I joined in 2000, left in 2015 as a regular, and then did another 3 years as a reservist. But actually, it wasn't till I think I was in my 30s, I found a comic shop local to me, and started going in there, and I experienced D&D for the first time. And that's how I sort of got into it. So actually, when I started when I joined Gary in the Tactical Advanced Game group, I was actually quite sort of junior in terms of tabletop role-playing games. But I'd been through a lot of experience myself, and I've seen someone in the comments dropped in, straight into divorce and homelessness. Well, to be fair with you, I think the name David, I was exactly the same boat as you, mate. I left the military, got divorced, lived in a caravan for almost 2 years, and built myself up from nothing, from being at the bottom of the bottom. So I've been through probably a similar pathway to you, and that's one of the reasons I've always liked that sort of geeky fantasy sort of genre. But one of the reasons was to socialize with people, and actually I found that it was massively beneficial to start doing things like that. And even painting Warhammer figures as well. So I found them both very therapeutic. So when I found Tactical Advanced Game was starting up, and World Games Therapy UK were looking for sort of the guinea pigs or the trialists for Tactical Advanced Game to see if this was actually any beneficial for military veterans and serving personnel. And I was one of the first to join. I think I was the first in that initial group, running the first campaign that we did with Gary. And it's just sort of grown from there, and from my love of D&D. So I run games at home, I run games online for the charity. So yeah, it's just sort of blossomed from there.
So quite early on, we were playing these. As I say, we started by looking at homelessness just because that was where I was working and I knew that area. And if if you're setting up a charity, one of the biggest challenges is getting funding. And so I kind of knew this sector. I thought we could probably get some funding. And around at the same time, I honestly can't remember. I can't remember. It just seems such a coincidence. But I think the NHS just contacted us and said, we're thinking about doing a veterans project. And I just happened to be a veteran. I think that's what happened, but maybe I contacted them, but I don't think I think they contacted us. But very early on, there's had this conversation with NHS veterans about the possibility of doing therapeutic gaming. And they asked two questions. One question was, would there be any interest? And I know, Steve, company makers, I know you just make similar. There is a huge interest in the military for gaming. But that was a good question. Is there any interest? And then the second question was, are you going to do any harm? Because if these people, these military veterans have got trauma, and you're playing a game where in their imagination, they're skulking around in the dark, armed to the teeth, in their imagination, hyper vigilant, just waiting to get attacked. Is that not going to trigger PTSD? And again, really good question. So before we set out to start this potential NHS veteran sort of social prescribing therapeutic gaming project for military veterans, we thought we'll do a little pilot project. That was probably 3 years ago now, Steve.
Yeah.
And Steve was one of the first guys involved in that project. And we've run the project for 3 years now, and it's developed into this group that Steve runs called Tactical Master Games. And we started to get quite a bit of data from that. And very quickly, what we've found is that there is, first of all, there is a lot of interest in gaming across the military to tap into, and a lot of military personnel are just gaming anyway, and they're just gaming themselves therapeutically. And you look at bits of research, you look at research from video gaming. A lot of military personnel play Call of Duty in this kind of game to kind of re-experience in a safe space some of those traumatic events, and they play through, and it is therapeutic. And then the other thing is, does it do any harm? Well, again, we were asking, we did a quick survey, we got about 160 respondents. And out of that, the vast majority said, yep, we play these games. It doesn't cause any problems at all. A small number said, I do play the games and I do get symptoms of PTSD, but again, it's helpful. That's part of the reason why I'm doing it. I'm playing through it. I'm getting these minor symptoms, but in a safe space. I know I'm safe, and it helps me just kind of remember the event, and file it in the correct way. Which again, when we speak to our psychologist, it's like that's exactly what we'd expect the therapeutic effect to be. And there is a tiny number, very like 1% of people who had PTSD symptoms that they just found traumatic. Not playing in our games, but just playing generally. So again, it's just something that we were aware of, that we could go into as potential going in there and working therapeutically, but also going in cautiously, and just being aware that we could. There is a potential of doing harm, and you can't totally. And guys in the military know this. You can't remove risk, but you can mitigate risk. You can reduce it, and that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
So was it a challenge for you to convince the NHS? I mean, whichever way around, whether they came to you or vice versa, because then, I mean, I may be making a sweeping statement here, but they're not publicly known for their innovation around, we have a very sort of staid image, I guess, about a very large organization. And that itself, of course, brings its own problems. What were the challenges for you to sort of convince the organization that this would work? Not just the psychologists, but, the actual organization.
Yeah, so I mean, we are as I keep banging on, we are game agnostic. We're not sort of affiliated to any game. We're certainly not about out trying to market a game. In fact, when we very first started, one of my sort of slightly cynical sort of NHS kind of views was, I was looking at this research coming from America, where their healthcare system is entirely in the marketplace, and I was looking at what they were calling research in Dungeons and Dragons therapy, and it was really, really tiny numbers of people, and it wasn't very robust research at all. And I was looking at this going, that's not research, that's marketing. They're marketing a private medical treatment, essentially. Right. So I was very cynical. But then when we started doing the project, you could just see the effect is profound. Very quickly, we're working with people experiencing homelessness. And we also did a project very early on with survivors of modern day slavery. And again, you could just see the profound change in people in one session. Over a month of sessions, you could see a real change. We've been working with the homeless sector for 3 years now, and the changes in their behavior is really profound. It's really, really interesting. So yeah, there is a genuine effect there. To answer your question, initially, when it was only a few years ago, we were talking about it, and people kind of kept going, "What game? What Dungeons and Dragons? What?" But the point is that the Wizards of the Coast, the guys who own Dungeons and Dragons, have done such a good job of marketing it now. When you go into meetings and funding talks and things, and you say, "Oh, we're going to play things," it's like Dungeons and Dragons. Everybody's heard about it, and interestingly, there's always one person in the table in the meeting who's played it or is playing it, and there's quite a few people sort of lean in and go, "Oh, right, I've heard about that." What so it is definitely easier now. So thank you, whoever made the Dungeons and Dragons movie. That's definitely helped us.
I think it's Stranger Things, if I'm absolutely honest.
You're
That was a
right.
major thing, wasn't
You
it?
are absolutely right. Stranger Things, and then Big Bang Theory. There's quite a lot of kind of that sort of geek thing going on. You're absolutely right. It's very zeitgeisty. It was very zeitgeisty, and then the movie came out, obviously, yeah, as
I
well.
mean, I must admit, we've been involved in, games tournaments and what have you. The sort of experience when people, particularly when they're playing face to face or in the room, if you like. I mean, the energy levels are off the end of the scale, and people's engagement and enthusiasm. Steve, is that what you find? Is that your experience? I assume that you do face to face as well as online.
Yeah, so we do face to face every year. We do a get together. It's actually in January this year. Sorry, next year at an event called Contingency. So it's the 27th of Jan to the 3rd of February. It's a week-long gaming convention. It's actually set up by another establishment, but we are lucky enough to be sort of given some accommodation there for free, and our veterans can join and play together. So that's our sort of yearly thing that we do, but it's primarily across the internet purely because we have members in Germany, Australia, the US. So, and even in the UK, we're sort of Wales, Scotland, all the way down to the south. So it's kind of spread. But, we have I've lost my train of thought then.
We were
Apologies.
talking about whether, I guess the difference between face to face and online, and the
Yeah.
advantage of online is they're all over the world, of course. And
Yeah, so there is a massive difference. So you're right in the fact of interaction and being able to sort of cue yourself off of body language and things like that when you're having this sort of in-person discussion and you're doing that role playing is a lot easier. So online does have its problems. So it does have, sometimes a little bit of crossover or crosstalk, and you might lose a bit of speed because it takes slightly longer to get through. But in general, I think it's still very, very positive.
hmm. Now, when you're operating online, we experience this in the workshops we do. Sometimes you kind of lose the sort of conversations that happen around the fringe, but are not necessarily right at the core of
Yeah.
what everyone. So you might say to the guy sat next to you or a lady sat next to you, "Well, what do you think?" But it's kind of you do that on Zoom, of course, and it's just bedlam because it's one person at a time speaking, isn't it? So, swings and roundabouts, I guess.
Yeah, it
We,
does cause some right interesting pause points, or where someone is continually talking and you've got another guy sort of sat there, but as a DM or GM, and you have that experience to be able to sort of make some appropriate pauses for others to bring in, or you purposely bring in an environmental situation that drags another player into the conversation, rather than have them sort of left on the
Mm.
stringent. You're always constantly looking out for everyone on the chat anyway, and everyone in the video to make sure everyone's participating freely and it flows rather than sort of be stagnant with that stereotypical one individual that loves to hijack the whole session.
yeah, sorry about that. But
Gary's no longer a DM, I guess.
But also we do there's training, in-house training for across all of our projects, sort of special to role, whether it's, if you're working in the military project, it'd be training for that. If you're working with the homes sector, it'd be for that, for autistic kids, it'd be for that. So we do special training, but also just the general training as well. So all the GMs go through some training and peer support. So all of our GMs, they're in a group and they sort of chat about, the difficulties, the challenges that they're facing and how they could do it better. There's usually certainly the games that I'm involved with, the online games with the military guys, there's always a bit of a sort of check in and check out. You purposely start, everyone arrives like for a brew and a chat before the game starts. And that's kind of partly admin just to give everyone a chance to get there and make sure the microphones are working. But like we did today, but also it was interesting. The chat beforehand is always, we were just saying how good the chats were before these things start. The chats are that's really important. That is that water cooler moment where you just get to, vent about what you've been doing during the day and you talk about stuff, and then you can get on the game, and then you can hopefully be finishing time with a little chat at the end as well. So they're all really important.
They're
Parts of
super,
it.
I think,
Sure thing.
especially for the veteran aspect, because there's not, and people watching might be able to relate to this. If, for example, me and Gary share commonalities purely because we have been through, even if it was just basic training together, or I won't give Gary any jip because he didn't do P Company, but that's another
You
story.
don't know that. You don't know that. I didn't pass P Company.
But My point is, we have even there, right? There's this commonality, there's this brotherhood and or sisterhood, and that immediate bond where you have a connection because we have served in certain places and we've done certain things that are very different to civilian life. And that's not to say civilians can't empathize or can't see that viewpoint, but it's never quite the same. So having that sort of moment together online, whether that is at the beginning of the chat or whether that is a chat through Discord, where we just sort of have a mental health check-in and we sort of type in messages to people and just sort of open up to the group and say how is everyone doing. I think they're really, really important, especially when you feel slightly safer. I think that's a lot of the feedback that I get from our guys is that they when we're sort of looking at should we open the group up to civilian defense civilians, for example, and it was very much the consensus that the group felt safer and felt the ability to be able to talk freely about whether it's banter, whether it's trials and tribulations or whatever they're going through. They felt that it's a better, safer community as wholly veterans and serving personnel.
Mm.
And it's interesting because we're
Gary,
seeing that. So I was going to say we're seeing that across all the projects.
I was about to ask that. So
all the projects it's about bringing communities together. So we've got projects, whether it's for autistic young people, there's a sense that people feel very, very. It's very important that they have a community. That there's just this understanding, a shared understanding. It doesn't mean to say they're going to talk about autism or in the same way the military. When I'm in the groups with the military guys, I left 20 years ago, and I was just totally back into civilian life. I loved the army. So proud of being in the military, but I didn't really think I hadn't realized I'd missed it until I was in the tag games, and I just heard the players chatting and bantering, and I missed it. It's such a huge part of your life for so long, and it's just things that are unsaid. You just know you're in a room full of people who've had a shared experience without talking about it. You just know it, and I find it incredibly comforting, and it's a huge part of my week is to just spend time bringing people together. And you see that across all the projects, this idea of sort of combating isolation. I don't regard myself as being socially isolated. I've got family and friends and things. I've got family at least. I've met people, but I'd become isolated from these people who had this military experience, which is an unusual experience and a very deep experience when you're in the military for over a decade, whatever. You just live and breathe it. And it's something I personally feel I hadn't realized I'd missed it until you do this group.
So given that you work with lots of different groups of people, do you find that people that join those groups have struggled to find a forum, if you want to call that, a game in this instance, that suits them, that works for them? Is there sort of like a eureka moment? Oh, I found something that is for me because there's similar-minded people in the group.
Yeah, I would definitely say from the military, the veterans and the serving personnel side, 100%. There is a certain way military personnel speak or have this sort of banter or relationship between each other that from the outside world looking in could be perceived as something absolutely hideous. And they'd be like, oh, hands would throw up and people would be exceptionally upset with things that have been said. But actually, it's almost like banter to an extreme level. And it's almost like a coping mechanism of what I've found for a lot of soldiers through my experience is that you make the worst of the current situation or you take things to the extreme so that when extreme things happen, actually it doesn't seem extreme at all because you've already been talking about, I don't know, and apologies for graphics here, but losing a leg or something like that. Or so instead of thinking about that, you've actually been making a comical joke of it by writing a name on your boots. Bill and Ben or whatever you call your feet, and well, see you later, Bill and Ben, as you go out the door from a PB on a patrol, and that's the kind of thing that I think that people miss in a weird way. Because it's not because it's heinous crime or hideous conversation. It's just that commonality and that connection. I think that is really important.
So, Steve, do you think then that because we often hear that people when they leave the service, at their time is up for whatever reason, And then it's not till quite a few years later they think about re-engaging in a little bit in the way Gary's just spoken about, that he kind of rediscovered that world. So it's not something you might do a year afterwards, but it might be 2, 3 or plus years. Is that something you've seen?
Yeah, again, from own personal experience, I think when I left the regulars, I went straight into the reserves and did another couple of years there. But then I left it for quite a few years, and I didn't do any remembrance parades. I didn't do any of that. I didn't get my medals out my cupboard, or didn't even dust off the beret, But and it wasn't till this year that I actually did my first proper remembrance parade. And I think you do kind of disassociate yourself from service or from that, because it's quite an odd transition, especially if you join young. I joined at 16, so I spent my entire youth and my adulthood actually growing up as a man, as an individual in the military. And then when you come to leave that, and you don't have someone telling you where to be and what to wear every single day, and then all of a sudden you are having to think of that by yourself. And as much as that seems silly, but you have to go to Tesco's and buy your food. I'd never had to go to Tesco's before, because I just walked into the mess and someone cooked it for me, and I just get a plate and it's all done. And you have to think about what you're going to do every day. Whereas you would have your Part 1 orders or your regimental orders, where you are told what to wear, when to be, and what time. So yeah, I do think it's a strange world when you leave the military. So it's always good to sort of come back and reconnect.
There is another element of games as well, and we're playing games. We're talking about sort of tabletop role-playing games. We're talking about games like Dungeons and Dragons, or there are lots of other games. And in Tag, they play all kinds of games. They play Aliens, like as in like the movie, but a game version of that. And Cthulhu is very kind of dark, sort of demonic world. There's loads of different games they play. But in all of the games, there are some commonalities, and they are generally that you're a small group of people working closely together, and you've got a set of skills, and you're cooperating together to achieve a goal. Generally, there is jeopardy. There's something that could go wrong. Often it's like you could be killed, or you could be hurt, or your friends could be hurt. And what I think is interesting, having just started playing with military veterans in the past few years, and having played Dungeons and Dragons for years and years and years with civilians, having been in the military, was just that it's just fascinating watching military veterans play, or watching serving personnel play through these games. Because when a civilian does it, no offense to our civilians listening, when it's just fantasy, it's just make believe, it's just an imaginary thing. When you see military people doing it, it's not at all. They've rehearsed and they've done this for real. They're remembering what it's like, and again, I know Steve's taking the mixing at me, but I've done games where I've sort of been the GM, the games master, and you set up these real sort of difficult monsters for them to fight. And these military veterans, this personnel, they just come through your dungeon and they just wipe everything out. They just kill everything. They're doing sort of pairs fire maneuver. They're using tactics together. And it's interesting to see just how good they are at kind of killing things and moving through. But also they have a set of skills that you're just not going, that were real skills that they really have honed in the real world. And they're getting a chance to use them again in a fantastical setting, but they're still getting a chance to sort of to scratch that itch, and do things together. And we should do a YouTube channel. We should definitely film military guys playing Dungeons and Dragons. It's hilarious.
So since you started this and came up with this idea, what's changed? What do you do differently than you did when you first started DMing for veterans playing D&D or Call of Cthulhu?
Make the monsters a lot harder. Have a lot more monsters.
Don't give them any firearms. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. I don't think I don't do anything different. I think it's the same game. All of our games, again, of course, all at charity are all co-created. I think anybody who's watching who plays these games, they're always co-created with the players. You decide together what you're going to play. It's a cooperative. It's not me versus the players. It's not Steve versus the player. We're all doing it cooperatively. And so you decide what you're going to play. Interestingly, with the veterans, when we start saying what games do you want to play, we do play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, the new version of it. But almost all of the players really wanted quite a lethal game. Modern Dungeons and Dragons is quite difficult to kill somebody, and they almost all said we want kind of an old-fashioned version of the game where there's lethality. We want there to be horror. We want there to be, they wanted jeopardy. And again, I guess it's sort of scratching that itch a little bit. so that was, we designed the game slightly differently. To obviously, the way we play it with veterans is very different to the way we play with autistic young people or special education needs kids, which is a bit more, vanilla, a bit more like an adventure movie. Whereas the military version is often darker. It's often more humorous. It's often quite a dark humor, maybe.
Is that the power? Sorry, Steve, go on.
Oh, I was just gonna add one point. I think the only thing I've avoided, or the GMs have avoided at Tag is the setting wise. Gary touched on setting in being fantasy world. I think that actually gives the guys and the girls a easier transition in dealing with anything that they're dealing with, right? What we've decided is we are not going to go into. There's a couple of TTRPGs that take you back to things like World War II, the Vietnam War, things like that. One of the David in the chat's dropped in a veterans playing SAS Rogue Regiment. We've actually stepped away from that just so we don't push the boundaries on anybody's triggers and things like that. So we actually take a step back slightly. So adding that fantasy element, as Gary pointed out, gives that sort of allows them to apply skill sets, and it gives the sort of danger sense, but it doesn't bring them into reality. It keeps them in this sort of make-believe world still.
So you have a lot of control over the game, of course.
Yeah. I mean,
how it's run and what the objectives are, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we do. Traditionally, any TTRPG is played with, people do a session 0. So they will set up and talk to all their individual players and as a group, a collective, and you discuss how you want the game to be. So we do a sort of precursor to that, and we sit and we have a session 0, but prior to that, it's like a session -0 where we will speak to the people that are joining the game on an individual basis. So I'll advertise the game on Tag. We'll get a few people that want to join. I'll speak to them individually, and I'll just go through a few things with them. It's not invasive or 20 questions. It's just more like, what do you want to experience? What do you want to get out of it? Is there anything that might push the boundaries or hit on any triggers? Just so we can be aware of that and not push anything too far.
Thank you. We've got quite a lot of comments. I'd like to read through some of those. If anybody in the audience has any questions, please put them in the Q&A. We'll come to the comments. Gary, what do your future plans look like?
With the charity?
Yeah.
We're really busy.
Apart from find a friend, obviously.
If anybody wants to be my friend, please text.
Put it in the chat.
I know it was Steve hadn't texted. Annoying. The charity was so busy, and one of the things with the charity is it's in terms of I'm one of the trustees. So the trustees, it's all about governance, it's all about frameworking, so that kind of boring stuff of just making the charity safe. And one of the things is de-risked. And when we're inundated with people asking us to do projects, and it's about kind of controlling that growth. The charity is getting, you're a big charity, we're getting bigger. But what we are doing next year is, so this year we started out doing projects for military veterans and people experiencing homelessness and similar things to homelessness. So we had projects for homelessness, survivors of modern day slavery, addiction recovery, that kind of thing. And we're still running all those projects and expanding them across London and across the UK. And then we did the military veterans projects, and they're expanding, and we're getting more of those. We're getting more GMs trained up to the military projects. We're talking to America and Canada, military personnel there, we're sort of working with them as well, and intelligence services in America. So we're doing that. And then this year we got some funding for young persons projects. So we're doing young persons projects for young autistic young people, kids with special educational needs, gender issues, for LGBTQ trans issues for 18 to 25-year-olds as part of the young persons project. Looked after young people in care, kids in care homes, that kind of thing. So we're doing young persons projects, and they're expanding. They're funded for sort of 2 or 3 years, and we're expanding those by region across the UK. So that's really busy doing that. That's the current project. And then it takes us about a year to have a working group to develop our next projects. We do it very thoughtfully. We have a group of experts by lived experience, or experts because they're professors or academics. And the next projects we're looking at are forensic projects. So we're going to go into prisons. We think we're going to go into Pentonville Prison, Broadmoor, which is a mental hospital, not a prison, but there's some pretty forensic cases in there. And we do some projects for young people at risk of gang involvement across the UK. So we're doing those forensic projects, and then, as I mentioned, we're doing the dementia projects as well. So that's going to keep us busy. We're also, we can't really quite announce it just yet. Hopefully by the end of the week, next week, well, I'll text you to Steve and you can announce it. But we're hopefully going to be able to announce that we're running the UK's first international conference, academic conference in therapeutic gaming. So we're very pleased to be announcing that soon. So we're going to be quite busy doing that. And we're just continuing our training and running courses and things. Yeah. So just really busy.
Not
and,
much then is the short answer.
And it's all run by volunteers as well. So this is all run by, not me, but just a massive team of volunteers. So we're also looking for volunteers. So anybody out there, we're very keen to get people. And it's not London centric, from the regions, from Scotland, we want to get everyone involved. Yeah.
So Steve, where do you see TAG going?
Yeah, so I mean, for us, it's all about growth over the next 12 months. So we want to expand our subscriber base. Well, not that anyone subscribes and pays anything, but we want to get more people on board. Whether that is people that want to volunteer and, GM for us, or whether that's people that just want a game, just want to meet a load of veterans, just want to build on a community and have that safe space and that cool environment to join, and it's free. Who doesn't want free gaming? If I wasn't the GM, I'd be on it all the time. But that's what we're kind of trying to do over the next 12 months. So an increase of our marketing capabilities to drive that sort of user engagement, attend more events, and also raise some money. So last year we did we got a big giant D20, and we had it all signed by various different people that I collared at various different shows. So people like the cast from Critical Role, the cast from Roll Britannia, lots and lots of different people.
Ian Livingston.
Ian Livingston, yeah, signed as well. There was loads of people that signed this massive D20, and we auctioned it off, and hopefully we're going to do the same again this year. Same again next year for 2025.
Cool, lots of plans. So Gary, you sent me some information by email earlier today, which I asked you for, which I'm just going to drop in the chat for everyone. Do you want to just quickly, you should be able to see that, which is you basically sent through your website, your email, and the survey. Do you want to just quickly talk through that, please?
Yeah, so we really would. So anyone who's listening, if any of this sounds of interest to them, I mean, do get in touch with us. Partly because you could join, if you're military, you could join Steve's group and you could just take part and have that fun experience. But also from a sort of a charitable point of view, you could really help us. There's lots of things you could do to help. So, for example, I mentioned this whole sort of journey with the military group started a couple of years ago when somebody contacted somebody about the NHS veterans things. I'm not quite sure. But there's a discussion between us NHS veterans. We're getting to the point where in the new year, we're going to go back to NHS veterans and say, look, we've run this for a couple of years. We're really confident, and we've got a bunch of specialists involved in looking at it. We're really confident that we can run this safely. And there is a huge interest in this, that we could do that as an online project, and also possibly do it face to face as well, as part of their offer that they offer to people with PTSD. Also, I can't quite talk about the details, but in the next couple of days, we're speaking to a university, and the looks as we're going to be starting a research project as well. So we'll be doing a research project into the military veterans, the benefits, or otherwise. I think it'd be the benefits of role-playing games, or playing games for the mental health benefits. And that's not just PTSD. We keep talking about PTSD. And the biggest problem that veterans experience in terms of mental health are just common mental health disorders. It's primarily depression and anxiety. And then it's addiction, mainly alcohol. And then the third one is PTSD. So it's not just all PTSD. It's the whole mental health thing. So we're going to start a research project on that. So again, anyone who gets involved, you'd be helping us out. There's a little free online survey thing at the bottom. If you click on that, if you're a military, regular TA anywhere in the world, if you click on that and just follow the questions through, it is anonymized, and that would really help us out when we're approaching the NHS and just going, look, this is the data that we've got before we start the survey. So that would help us. So yeah.
Cool, thank you. Okay, I'm going to read through some of these comments on here. Anuska says, want to play D&D, but not sure how to find a group. Is that best to email you?
You just found one, I think. Yeah, absolutely. So there's an email there. Drop us an email. If you're going to drop me an email, I get loads of emails every day. And if you just let me know where you are in the country as well, because we're kind of developing regional committees now right across the UK. So just let us know where you are. We'll put you in touch with the people as those committees develop. Or if you want to volunteer and be in a committee, that's even more helpful. So just let us know what your interests are.
So write a really long email.
Keep it very short.
I want to be involved any which way I can.
I'll forward that to
Mike
Steve.
says he's mostly into tabletop games like Team Yankee and Warhammer, but I also play D&D and board games. Obviously, Team Yankee and Warhammer are war games primarily, not role-playing games. Well, they are war games. Are you doing any work in that area?
Yep. Steve?
Yeah, so we will at TAG. We've just started up doing virtual tabletop through Steam. So you can do Warhammer. I'm sure your viewers know that you can play Warhammer online between two players. Once you download the app through Steam, it's actually, I think it's about £8 or something like that, and all the facilities within that, like all the models and things like that, are free. So actually, if you don't want to paint models and you really don't want to have to go out and buy a load of them and all the rest of it, which can be quite pricey, you can just do it online, which is a really good way. And we've just started that in the last couple of months, just through demand, because like people are dropping in the comments here, Warhammer's a huge sort of draw.
Cool. It is also worth telling the audience at this point that Gary and Steve's background are blurred because of the sheer volume of models or boxes of models awaiting painting in the background. So geek is cool these days, guys and girls. I study gaming within university, so I'm learning about all different concepts of gaming. Bradley, you've said that. I don't know if you've got a follow-up around that, or if you'd like to get in touch with.
So Bradley, we've got an academic faculty. We've got a committee of academics, and they're looking at developing the conference, our academic conference, and also again, the first to hear is in 2026 we're going to launch the journal, the International Journal of Therapeutic Gaming. So so if you're interested in the academic side, get in touch. It's one of our 3 charitable aims. One is to deliver project. The second is to develop an evidence base. So we're working with a bunch of universities on that. And then the third project is to deliver evidence-based teaching.
Okay, so Bradley, if you want to explore the academic side of all this, email Gary. I think you can make a lot of emails tonight, Gary, if you're not careful. David says, I've served 31 years in the Army, finishing with 4 years at the Royal Centre for Defence Medicine. I've been involved with role-playing and board gaming games since 1978. I have also run board games as a dementia champion friend.
Yeah, again, David, we'd love to hear from you. You drop us a line, just put that into an email.
Is dementia an area you're looking at, Gary?
So next year, so we've been asked by, we were asked by Whipps Cross. I had a conversation from the occupational therapist at Whipps Cross Hospital, which is just sort of, where is it? Just sort of east of London, isn't it? And I thought it was going to be the head injury department. I thought it'd be like young people getting head injuries, and they're saying, can we look at role-playing games for that? And I went there for this meeting, had some plans for what we're going to talk about. And he went, oh, no, it's dementia. And I was like slightly scuppered, thinking, well, how on earth are you going to play Dungeons and Dragons? My mum and my dad have got dementia. Their dad's got dementia. My mum's kind of very early dementia. And I was thinking, I can't imagine them playing games. But the beauty of role-playing games, or just the beauty of games, these sort of tabletop games, is they're just infinitely creatable. You just need a pen, a pencil, and a bit of paper, and you can create a game. So I started chatting to the OTs, and we came up with all these ideas of types of games. It could be an intergenerational game where it's actually the younger generation, it would be like our age, my age, younger generation with older parents are playing a game, and you're using them as a resource, like a kind of a live Google going, oh, the game's set in the 1950s. What were the 1950s like? And they would tell. So there's all kinds of things we're looking at. So we're doing a dementia project with them. And also we're doing, with the dementia project, we're chatting in London to a group of clinicians who are looking at dementia with adults with Down syndrome, because, and tragically, people with Down syndrome have got a risk of very early dementia. So we're looking at projects there. And it's a younger population. So again, they're more into gaming. So dementia really just make it very interesting for next year. So again, whoever that is, let us know, because we'll be setting up a working group looking at dementia. And then we might be using board games for that as well.
Mike says here, have you thought about linking up with the Veterans War Games Association, who do all types of gaming?
We've thought about it, and we've done it, I think, Steve, haven't we? We're good pals.
Yes. So we have had some conversations with them. So it's ongoing. Hopefully we'll be doing more with them next year. So watch this space. I can't see who wrote that comment, but
it's Mike. It's in the Q&A if you can open it.
Yes. Yeah. I just need to scroll up. That's what I need to do.
That's all right. So, Mike, again, if you want to drop and determined to fill Gary's inbox tonight, if you want to drop Gary an email, obviously once there's some news, if you're not a member of the Wargaming Association, I'm sure they'll be able to provide it for you. Shania, apologies if I've pronounced that incorrectly. Are you familiar with the virtual world called Second Life? There are several role-playing opportunities, including D&D. It's immersive and very interactive, including voice.
I'm not, Steve. I'm not aware of it. I'm going to
No,
Google it now.
I'm making a note of that, but we have quite a few, especially in tech, we have quite a few really experienced GMs, and they've run some absolute mind-boggling games from Goblin Quest to, Candela Obscura, which is a brand new TTRPG. So the chances are we probably have some people that have done that. So from my side, on the veterans bit, if you are a veteran or a serving personnel and you want to join in those games and you want to partake or even volunteer to run a game, absolutely love to have you on.
Super. Thank you, Steve. Ben says, casually did play D&D or casually play D&D with some friends, but as of late, I'm just playing simulation games. I don't know what simulation games you talk about because that's, is it a tractor? Is it a plane? Who knows? There are so many simulation games. But if you are interested in playing a bit more D&D, Ben, get in touch with Gary, please. Michael says, hi, everyone. I run a local D&D RPG night in the Northwest. Love board games too. Other board games, Gary, that's an interesting point. Because when you talked about dementia, I was thinking, I mean, there are obviously probably tens of thousands of tabletop types of game. And it's it's fair to say, I think there is a game for everybody, really, isn't there?
That's the thing. So the projects are co-created with the clients. So you sit down and go, what do you want to play? So with the dementia projects, I think we might be using board games. What day are we today? On Monday, yesterday, we were doing a project with the guys, the folk experiencing homelessness. We normally play a role-playing game. It's normally a Dungeons and Dragons game we play, but it was like their last game before Christmas, and they wanted us to bring in board games. So we brought in Cthulhu, like the pandemic. People might be nodding. The pandemic games kind of rebranded as Cthulhu. Yes, I love it. We played that. We had a blast, and it was so much fun. The interesting thing about the pandemic game or the Cthulhu game, which I like, is it's cooperative. So again, you're not, it's not one person wins, everybody else loses. It says you're all with Cthulhu in pandemic. You're all on the same side. And again, I think cognitively, it just makes you flex your brain a bit more, trying to work together as a team. So yeah, we love board games.
Yeah. So they're not all adversarial by any stretch of the imagination, are they?
Not at all, no. Not at all.
David says he left the army straight into divorce and homelessness. I know you mentioned that, Steve. If there's anything we can help with, either myself or Gary and the team, please get in touch. Clement says, I've played all sorts of sci-fi, fantasy, and historicals both before.
Sorry, just to pause you, Steve, just on that last comment again. Yep. For all of our groups, we have a working group or a committee of experts, and lived experience is an expertise. So again, I mean, and the committees meet online. So even if you're in an area of the country where you can't get together and play physically with the homeless clients, if you're interested, you could be a huge resource to us. On a committee or something like that kind of role.
Yeah, just get in touch, basically.
I think that's
my mission still. I played all sorts of sci-fi. Sorry, Clement says I've played all sorts of sci-fi, fantasy, and historicals both before and after service. Heavy on the painting and modeling side of things. Mostly nowadays, it's mostly old stuff I wanted as a kid. I've used the stuff in dealing with life without realizing it. I think because I enjoy it. I'm an infantry veteran of Afghan campaign. I've been undergoing treatment for PTSD and I've become very interested in therapy too, where the two cross over. I'm also interested in how these sort of games can also prepare us lead us into life events.
Yeah, painting is hugely therapeutic. So that's, like I said earlier, how I started to get into it, and actually using that as a form of escapism from past experience, should we say, and things like that. So yeah, absolutely, that does work very, very well. And when you can actually do that in your own time and do that with a little bit of music on or whatever, and chill yourself. You wanted to then expand on that and start pushing into the next sort of boundaries, then tabletop role-playing games, absolutely perfect for that, to start exploring those sort of areas. So yeah. Oh, go on.
I was going to say, it's amazing how many people just paint models as well, isn't it? No matter what the game is, they just, that whole, like you say, get in the zone, lose a whole day painting some models.
There's another charity, a brilliant charity, Models for Heroes, which does painting with military veterans. We've also got a new project with the Young Persons Project, which is just painting miniature figures, just starting up, I think, in Yorkshire, and also with the military project. One of the things that we do is we go to conventions, and our volunteers, we try and get volunteers there for free, and they get to attend a convention for free, but we make them work. And at the last convention at Comic-Con, Steve was there with a couple of military veterans who are all amazing painters. I have to say, to me, they look like professional painters. And we were asked by Comic-Con if we could have a therapeutic painting stand, and we were just inundated with people. As soon as the doors opened of Comic-Con, and people literally just came to our stand and sat down and started painting miniature figures. It was crazy. But yeah, so
Do you think that's a way that some, because obviously painting generally is a solo activity, because you are really quite, I know you can do it socially, but we're probably doing it at home on their own in the first instance. Do you think that sort of diving into the sort of model painting is a way of people just making themselves feel comfortable within what is, quite a big, busy environment, just to sort of, I can do this and sort of get my bearings, and I feel a bit more relaxed now I've kind of done my relaxing painting or whatever. You think there's an element of that there?
Yeah, 100% for, again, from a veteran experience, the military is very, very simple. And this is not a slate to being in the armed forces at all, but it's very, very simplistic. It's one goal and you're driving towards that one place. It's a straight road, pretty much, right? Model painting is very similar. You get your model, you build it, and you're focused on it, and then you paint it, and that is it. And you're seeing it all the way through to completion. Real life is not quite like that, and by real life I mean civilian life. It comes with lots of different experiences, and ups and downs. And to take yourself away from that and just focus again on a model, it might take people back to being in the military. It might take people back to being in simpler times, and just allow them to relax and find themselves, give themselves a bit of breathing space.
Mm.
We've a couple of guys in the charity who are really into the sort of the psychology of painting figures. One of them is Joe Stameyer, who's a psychiatrist who is also a veteran, and he talks about a lot about the idea of not just sort of speed painting, but slow painting things slowly, and you talk about the sort of the psychology of the benefits of that. And the other guy who talks an awful lot about it is Finbar Westall, who's one of our trustees. He's also a neurodivergent coach, and he talks about the flow state that's achieved by painting. I'm not a psychologist, but they talk very in depth about the kind of the academic elements of it. And it is it's like knitting, isn't it? My wife sits and chats and she just knit. You just do something with your hands. I would imagine in the olden days it would have been men sitting around sort of chipping at flint and things. We'd have just done something with our hands. We just don't have a skill anymore. I don't have a skill anymore. I can't do anything.
That's the
act of just
proper
doing
olden
something.
days if we're napping flint, I have to
But
say.
that's it though. But it is evil. But that's why we're playing games. It's because it's evolutionary. It's built into us. It's hardwired into us.
Yeah.
We're not hardwired to paint miniature figures, but we are hardwired to just fiddle with our hands and make things as we're talking.
Mm. David also says one of the best laughs I've seen was 4 veterans playing SAS Rogue Regiment. I dread to think. Role playing is a safe
Played it,
place to
lived it,
play
mate,
or
lived
fail.
it.
Hang on a sec. And big confidence resilience builder. Sorry, Gary.
Yeah. No, great. Yeah.
It is a huge confidence builder and resilience builder, again, from the groups that we run here in the tag side, in the veteran side. I've got a couple of guys that have low self-esteem and things like that, and actually, again, bringing similar like-minded individuals into that room with them, and they can chat, and it actually brings people out. And you see those that are less perhaps socially confident actually come out of the shell, whereas they might not have that opportunity where they've transitioned from the military into civilian life and they're lost in that big world.
Yeah.
Actually coming across to tag gives them that area, and certainly a safe place to play.
I mean, I have to say, with the people we work with, loneliness and isolation is without doubt the biggest issue. I hear what you're saying about the mental health stuff, Gary, and it's true. But I think loneliness and isolation, and whether that's a symptom of other things or it's the actual main problem, but it is a huge challenge for society as a whole, but definitely within the veterans community.
And I think I think isolation is the biggest thing that our charity does, is combat isolation. Even people who don't feel that they're isolated from people, you can still be lost in your own little world. And I've got a medical background. Medically, isolation is as bad for you as smoking cigarettes in terms of your death rate. Being isolated is terribly dangerous to us. Again, because from an evolutionary point of view, we're all supposed to be living with each other and, close in a close-knit world, a bit like the military, I suppose, where you're just living on top of each other and, sharing communally, sharing your life together.
Yeah, sharing stories and
Sharing
having some
stories,
banter, I think it's probably called.
Yeah.
David also says he's in Dunfermline, Scotland, so he's usually at the Tabletop Scotland. It's an expo of some sort, and then the UK Games Expo. So if you're planning to be either of those, Gary.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, UK Games Expo will be there. And we do panels as well. We do panels on therapeutic gaming. We're doing a panel there this year, and also David we're starting regional committees. One of the first regional committee we're looking at for the new year is Scotland. So if you're interested in getting involved and helping us and sitting on that committee, let us know.
Cool. Bradley says that sounds brilliant. Is there a link or some way to get in touch? I've obviously just put that into the chat. If for some reason that doesn't work, I'll be sending out an email tomorrow, which will have the recording of this and any of the links that Gary's shared with me that I've already shared in the chat. So you won't miss out, as long as the Eventbrite email doesn't end up in your spam box, of course. David also says there is a book out, Therapeutically Applied Role-Playing Games, The Game to Grow Method, from Elizabeth D. Kilmer, Jared Kilmer, and Adam D. Davis.
Yeah, so I know those guys pretty well. So the Game to Grow guys, they quite early on they asked if we could help with their teaching project. In the UK, our model is very collegiate. It's very kind of NHS. We're not in the marketplace. We're not privatizing anything. We'll work with anybody, and we'll share our experience freely, which means that we have grown very quickly, and we've got lots of experience. Even though we've been going for a far shorter time than our American friends and colleagues, we've already got a lot of experience that they haven't got, and they were asking us if we could help with that. We decided not to contribute because what we're going to do is we're delivering our training projects ourselves for free to our volunteers. Rather, they were going to give us a discount for our volunteers. We thought, well, we'll just deliver it ourselves and we'll deliver for free. So we're doing our own projects, our own training. Later on this year, that the training that we're giving for free to our volunteers was going to be developed with our training faculty. That's going to become CPD training, and we're also, this is like 5 years down the line, we're already starting to talk to universities about doing a postgraduate qualification to kind of professionalize therapeutic gaming in the UK. But yeah, it's an interesting book if you're interested in the subject.
Final comment from David says he's lived in a military community all his life and he lives on his own in a 1-bedroom flat with no local friends. Yeah, so David, I think you definitely need to get in touch.
That's the modern condition, isn't it? Absolutely.
It is 100%.
I mean, again, David, I share very common ground with you there, mate. So please do get in touch. You can, as Gary's put there, or sorry, Steve's put the links into the survey. So fill out the survey, jump on Facebook. I think you'll find Game Therapy UK and Tactical Advanced Game on Facebook. We'll get you into the Discord. There's plenty of people in there to chat, to mingle with. There's games running, I think, every day of the week apart from Sunday. So there's stuff to join, there's people to chat to, and there's a community there for you, mate. So you're not alone, buddy. We are all here for you.
The only thing is, I'm not sure, David, but I'm reading between the lines. I've lived in a military community all my life. I'm not sure. Maybe if you're a family of, I think at the moment, TAG is just for veterans, military personnel and veterans. So you may not be able to get into TAG, but contact us. We can still get you into gaming. That's not a problem at all.
Yeah, I'm just checking. He said he left the army and went into homelessness. Yeah, I thought.
I'm so sorry. Okay, Bill, perfect. And then drop Steve a line. Yeah.
Pads, brat, and veteran. Yes.
There we
so
go.
David, get
Brilliant.
in touch. Just get in touch, and we'll either with Gary or myself, and we'll have a conversation and point you in the direction.
Ignore me. So, I'm usually wrong.
Yeah. Please pay attention, Gary. It really helps the process enormously.
I need a coffee.
It's not so easy to keep Gary quiet. I'm winning. So look at the time, 8 o'clock. Perfect. I would like to thank our audience for coming and really making a great contribution. There's loads and loads of stuff in there. I would like to thank Gary and Steve for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Please, we're going to put this. I'll send this recording. We'll be on YouTube, and we'll send this out, plus all the information that Gary and Steve have been talking about. If you've got any questions, please get in touch. Don't sit there in silence, because there are people out there that would be more than happy to at least have a good old chat, if nothing else. That just leaves me to say Thank you to everybody for joining us. Thank you, Gary, and thank you, Steve.